Beyond Science, Conversations with Arthur M. Young. Interviewer Charles Fauvre discusses issues of science and consciousness with Arthur Young, honored inventor of the Bell helicopter, philosopher, and author of The Reflexive Universe. Today, the dragon of science, overcoming the polarity between science and human values.
Hello. Arthur, your ideas tend to bridge many disciplines, science being one of them. Yet, you seem to be far more concerned with science and the role of science than with any of the others. Can you tell us about that?
Well, it's because science has become the religion of today. Now, I'm not interested in science because it's religion, but because it shouldn't be the religion. It cannot supply those values and ultimate, I have to call them first causes, that religion is supposed to supply. Science doesn't deal with what's bigger than ourselves. But it's become a religion because it deals with truth. Everyone knows that science is dealing with truth, and what religion has to say has been pushed over into the department of faith. You can only hold on to that so long. You begin to wonder, well, why, like the Irishman said, oh, sure, faith is believing what you know ain't so. So when science discredits so many things that were taken on faith, then the whole fabric of religion weakens and is replaced by the solider ground of science. Well, it's equally wrong for science to be a dogma or a belief system. Science is based on assumptions and theories which it proposes to test, and if the theories don't work, then they use another theory. It should not be based on a dogma. And it is getting to be a dogma. But what I want to talk about today is the way this dichotomy between, well, it's not really just science and religion, it's science and human values, really, because science doesn't have much to, it actually denies human values. So that you get a dichotomy between science and humanity, science and persons. But the funny thing is that I first got a handle on this with a cartoon that Dean John used in one of his reports. This was a cartoon from the New Yorker. And in the cartoon, we have a audience of knights in full armor listening to a lecture by a dragon. And the dragon says to the knights, I'm very happy to be with you tonight. While there are still great differences, I recognize that there are still great differences between us. The mere fact that I am addressing you tonight shows that we have made some progress. Dean John makes use of the dragon to illustrate this difference between the scientific point of view and the things that to him are murky, obscure, fearsome, these things that go boom in the night, these ESP things, to the scientist constitute a fearsome beast or a mythological beast that they don't quite know what he is. Of course, there's no such thing as a dragon in actuality, but it epitomizes that which one fears. What I'm trying to illustrate is that to the scientist, that which he cannot calibrate and put on instrumentation is threatening and fearsome and unknown and dark and murky, and maybe it isn't even there, but it's still something that he doesn't like. The strange thing is, from the human point of view, it's the other way around. Science is the dragon, and his teeth are a nuclear formula, and he breathes math, and his excrement are nuclear waste, and so altogether all these terrible things about science, mainly induced by the fear of science. This is not just the fear of science in the sense of weapons, but the fear of math. I mean, just having to acknowledge a kind of knowing that you've lost track of. You no longer have it at your fingertips. You've surrendered it to the experts. So it now becomes fearsome. And even to scientists themselves, you will find the biologists won't dare go near quantum physics. I tried to get Bonner interested in quantum theory because I thought it would help biology. Bonner is a biologist at Princeton. And he said, well, I'd rather ride a dark horse off a cliff at night than go into quantum physics. So the dragon is also this science with all its calibration and mysterious formulas and things that people don't understand. Well, the dragon, St. George and the dragon, slaying the dragon, dragon guarding the beautiful princess. It's a theme throughout mythology, everywhere. But in general, the dragon represents the unassimilated aspects of the unconscious. And he always guards a treasure, a pearl, something of great worth. If you can go down into the unconscious, do battle with this creature, and capture this pearl of great price, you'll have something valuable.
Yes, and very often it's the concept of doing battle is reversed in that this disowned aspect of oneself must be re-owned and loved. And as soon as we can love the dragon, he will present us with the jewel.
Right. Well, this then, we have the dragon working both ways. We have the scientist afraid to deal with ESP. Now, ESP, let's say telepathy, feeling, telepathy, feeling at a distance, it's a human thing. It's like other sympathy, empathy, all those human things, love. Why should that be a dragon? Well, it's a dragon to the scientist because he can't calibrate it. It isn't mass, length, and time. It's none of the things that he has in his vocabulary. So he can't cope. Well, it's more easy to see that science is a dragon. It's science that's the dragon for people because they can't cope with math and nuclear formula.
I wonder if part of that equation is that science tries to put everything into that particular context, and everything doesn't fit into it, so it doesn't feel comfortable to people to try to do that.
Yes, but you can't really expect the scientist to put it elsewhere because he hasn't any elsewhere to put it.
But that's his problem, and I think possibly to the larger populace, his need to put everything in the fabric of his own ability to measure it or his own laws is a distortion that's not natural and doesn't feel proper.
Yes, but when science is the religion of the age, it isn't just his problem, it's everybody's problem.
Well, as long as it's a problem for everybody, science may not be the religion very much longer. And, you know, you can see it running into its walls more and more often, and it's getting more and more publicity as quantum physics finds its limits, for example.
Well, now I'm going by what happened when Dean John published his first paper in the Princeton Alumni Weekly. It was called Things That Go Bump in the Night. It was about Dean John's experiments with telekinesis. Nothing could be more hard-boiled than his experiments, because it was all done with steel balls and so forth. But nevertheless, it was threatening to the academic point of view. And it was called Things That Go Bump in the Night, and the great outrage came out. I mean, everyone was outraged because Princeton was doing witchcraft. This was terrible. Well, if you say it's the scientist's problem, I'm showing that it expands outwardly, and because people in general buy science as a belief system, what's threatening to the scientist is threatening to us all.
Certainly, there is certainly that element. I agree with you. I'm not disagreeing with you, Arthur. It's just another point of view.
Well, I'm much more concerned about the fact that human beings have given up a part of themselves. And I don't care how much they discover through meditation and through love and harmony, if they're going to reject the part of themselves that really deals with things, they're going to be helpless.
For sure.
But I don't, as long as it's kept in the category of complete separateness, and you're going to get witch burning, all those things that blacken our history. Just the term blacken, what does that mean? It means that you turned off the light. You're not looking at it. You're afraid of it.
Yes.
And if we've got things we're afraid of, we're only partly living. We're only partly.
I don't know if you think it's going to be possible for science to come home to the people, to become more humanized.
I sincerely hope that out of this dissipative system,
that's really what it's sounding like, isn't it?
Prigogine's term, there will emerge some new vision. And frankly, I think science is going to be strongly represented there.
I should hope so.
Now, not because science is good,
because of what it can contribute,
but because science has, you might say, made mistakes that can be most clearly corrected. Now, for instance, the concept of materialism. When all of these things, that's a scientific concept, and if it's not adequate, then it has to be corrected right there in those terms. You can't just vaguely say something is wrong. Now, science has the description of the spiritual element in the form of light.
Yes.
You could have said, oh, well, that was in the Genesis all along. God said, let there be light in the beginning. But not much can happen from that scriptural account because we don't know why. So we can get lost. That's just a word in what I'm saying. But when the scientist is talking about light, he can now, since 1900, talk about something that has no mass and no charge and is outside of time and space. We've got, while they're negative descriptions, they give you some precision, some direction of how to go. And this concept of light in the form of photons being responsible for all the interactions of living creatures, gives you much more knowledge of how spirit is interacting with matter. It's not just an isolated abstraction out there, certainly not with a long gray beard and so on like that. It's a vital factor that's putting dynamic interactions into this billiard ball world, making it tick.
Part of the fabric of the learning system
Right.
that we're in.
Yes.
And it's an important elucidator of our experience.
If you use the picture of fabric, fabric consists of threads going two ways. You could think of the material threads going one way and the spiritual threads going the other.
I like that.
But in any case, it's an interaction, and a close interaction. Now, another thing about science, I said that it could correct materialism. It can also correct rationalism, which is even worse than materialism, as having captured our thinking. You think that everything has to be rational. Well, science is finding that isn't the case. And yet, we will always go by that guiding line in ordinary life. Until we have some authorization, say from science, we can't endorse something that isn't rational.
Let me ask you another question. You have touched on your feeling that technology, which is the creation of science, has so mesmerized people that they give it a tremendous amount of force. And technology in itself is driving science now.
You mean with missiles and then satellites
and
and
home computers at,
okay.
at every level.
It's hard for me to think of that in any. It's just more sand for the ostrich is the term I like there.
More sand for the ostrich, I agree.
Well, you pose interesting new questions. There's so many things that this touches on, and I don't even know where to begin. And
Yes.
I mean, the concept of, let's say we're a democratic country, and we believe in the freedom of people to assert their rights, and it's a government for the people, of the people, by the people. Then we say, well, this is the best form of government, and we must extend it all over the world. We must enforce democracy everywhere. But there's some people that don't want democracy, so what do we do about that? Well, then we get into the missionary phase and trying. Now, there was a time when we were sending missionaries to China to teach them Christianity. But if you can judge from California, there are far more missionaries of Zen Buddhism and Hindu philosophy here in California than there are churches.
Yeah, right.
Moreover, they're not forcing it. They're
Yes.
being invited by it.
Right.
Well, this then raises the question of whether we really know what's good for everybody. I see this question of the democratic method coming in conflict with science. Because there's nothing democratic about science. Science doesn't vote as to what's going to be true. In fact, it's it's almost going too far in the opposite direction.
An independent legislator.
It's become bureaucratic to the nth degree, and not by the best minds. I mean, it becomes the editors of journals and well, in any case, it's a monolith of sorts, and doesn't have this corrective that the democratic process is supposed to have, where as soon as you get one side tyrannizing the other, they can't go on indefinitely. There's a new deal every 4 years, and people have a chance to swing it back.
Well, it's interesting. You know, we've talked about the increasing chaos. To go back to Prigoghine's model, in so many different elements of our society, in government, education, politics, even human contentment, religion, and the whole fabric is seen by some people as entering a phase almost of terminal chaos, so that it's getting ready to reassemble at a higher order. And
Well, this is Prigoghine's thesis.
that's the way he sees that working.
Right, and
Irrespective
I don't
whether,
agree with that.
irrespective of whether or not that's exactly the way it works, this is seen as generating enough energy so that some shift in consciousness on a global scale is close to occurring. Would you have any feeling about that?
If I'm consistent with my own theory, I have to say that it's not order springing miraculously out of chaos. It's learning the law and using it to build the next stage. Now this involves negative entropy, which Prigogine doesn't really
I understand. I'm
bring
not
out.
trying to, I'm only using part of him to illustrate something.
I
that's
know,
all.
but it's an optimist. It's a hopeful thing. We've got a mess, and
Yeah, what you're
hopefully
saying
next
is
stage
that,
will be something.
a lot of wishful thinking can go that way, and it's really not based upon the foundation that you see necessary.
I'm trying to use a theory here. The theory would, the fork would be the important term. I mean,
Yeah.
the change
Yeah.
would be when a principle was recognized. Now, so far, I can't see that there are any principles of social science, economic science. Economy has been a series of things that last for a few years, and then they turn out just as
Sure.
disastrous, if not more so, than the preceding one. How I would say ecology is the first beginning of seeing how things really work and trying to do something about it. And that recognition by ecologists that there's something going on that they didn't fully appreciate, better let nature alone, is, I would say, the first dawning of the kind of sociological wisdom that I would anticipate. It isn't that it'll emerge from chaos. The chaos may make difficulties, but it really calls for a definite, clear-cut recognition of some principle or law.
This is a recognition of interrelatedness, for
Yes,
example.
yes.
And I'm struck by that fabric that you described a while ago, whereby material elements are going this way and
Yes.
spiritual elements are going this way. Maybe we're shifting the focus from figure to ground, whereas the materialism was the figure and the spiritualism the ground. Maybe it's coming forward now and assisting the perceptions of unity that you're discussing.
Right. Well, I'd like to see similar improvements in economics. Now, there are other factors. You get into the fact that every 55 years, regularly for the last 1,000 years, there have been periods of great inflation. So maybe the inflation is due to that and not due to some particular government policy.
Due to our expectation of it happening every 55 years.
Well, all of these things, oh no, there hasn't, it's just beginning to emerge that there is this 55-year thing.
Right.
It wasn't in the, I'm talking about how to figure things out.
All right.
And part of it is going to be not possible to change, but it's a difficult subject, and there has to be a real science.
We've really reached far afield here. It's been very
I'm
interesting.
afraid
for me.
we've been far afield. Maybe that helps, but I started to talk about the dragon of science, but I could wind it up by saying that we're going to need the best science we can concoct, and I don't mean science as it is.
Yes.
I mean using our heads even and over and above and against and so forth, all this teaching that we should get rid of our egos. We better get straightened out first before we throw them away. Because I think the mind is the only thing that can, well, for one thing, it's the only thing that can slay the slayer.
Right.
Remember the old Chinese proverb,
Yeah.
the mind is slayer of the real.
Right.
Well, we're all recognizing that, but only the mind can slay the slayer.
Sure.
The same principle that says go out and shoot all the coyotes because they're eating the sheep or the deer, that's a mental determination, but it's only mind that can correct that by saying, here, watch out, you're killing the ones, this was a valuable
Yes.
adjunct to the whole system.
Surely if we were to disown science, then it would become one of the things that went bump in the night.
Well, I suppose the real last bottom line of our discussion is to get science back into common sense and common sense back into science. Common sense is no longer common, however.
I like that bottom line, Arthur, and I think that's a good place to wrap it up for today.
Okay.